Kosan 1. This silence is not Elpney. New standards always rearrange who feels comfortable around you. The moment your inner world begins to change, the old noise around you starts losing its grip. People who once felt natural begin to feel distant, not because love disappeared, but because your soul has outgrown the rooms where it once learned to survive. This is why the silence arrived. Not as punishment. Not as abandonment. Not as some cruel stretch of empty days. It came like winter comes to a forest, when everything on the surface appears still, yet beneath the soil roots are performing their oldest miracle. You call it loneliness because there are fewer messages now. Fewer invitations. Fewer conversations that stretch past the necessary. Fewer people checking in. Fewer moments where your phone lights up with proof that you still belong to someone's orbit. But beneath that human ache, something more sacred is happening. Your life is being retuned. The chosen season of isolation rarely announces itself with holiness. It usually arrives disguised as social distance, misunderstood moods, cancelled plans, and the strange realization that the people who once understood you no longer know how to stand beside the person you are becoming. At first, it hurts in ordinary ways. You notice how quiet your evenings have become. How long the walls seem to breathe around you. How meals are eaten without the soundtrack of conversation. How weekends no longer carry the same movement. How you scroll past other people's gatherings and begin wondering whether you disappeared from their minds, or whether your path simply turned where theirs could not follow. This is the part no one romanticizes. Sacred isolation still feels like human isolation. It still touches the nervous system. Still wakes old fears. Still whispers dangerous questions in the middle of the night. Am I being forgotten? Did I become difficult to love? Why does growth feel so much like being left behind? But the deeper truth is gentler and far more powerful. Silence is where your standards become audible. When your spirit raises its threshold for what it will entertain, tolerate, explain away, or shrink itself to keep, the social world around you must rearrange. Some relationships were built on the version of you that accepted crumbs and called them connection. Some people felt safe only when your boundaries were porous, when your availability was endless, when your worth could be negotiated. The new you no longer fits inside that architecture. And so the room empties. Not because you are less loved, because you are less available for what drains the life from you. There is a holy discomfort in becoming someone your old environment can no longer predict. The first thing isolation reveals is not other people. It reveals your own dependency on external mirrors. For years, maybe without realizing it, you measured your direction through response. Who texted back? Who praised the work? Who invited you? Who noticed your absence? Who validated your decisions? Now those mirrors are gone, or at least dimmed. And without them, you are standing face to face with the one voice that was always waiting beneath the crowd, your own. That is why this silence is not empty. It is occupied by the self you could never hear while performing closeness. There is a kind of social life built almost entirely from mutual distraction, shared complaints, recycled conversations, familiar loops, people meeting not to deepen, but to avoid themselves together. When sacred isolation begins, those loops start feeling strangely heavy. The same conversations no longer feed you. The same jokes feel thinner. The same group dynamics expose hidden exhaustion. Even your own participation starts to feel like costume work. So life pulls you back. A lantern in a cave does not complain that the cave is dark. It finally understands why it was lit. That is what this season is. You are the lantern. The cave is the silence. And only here can you see the shape of your own inner terrain. At first, you resist. You try to rebuild noise. You reach out to people who no longer feel aligned. You say yes to spaces your body already said no to. You reopen conversations that should have been allowed to die peacefully. But every forced interaction leaves you emptier. Because sacred isolation is not asking you to become antisocial. It is teaching you to become intentional. There is a difference. One comes from fear. The other comes from refinement. This season is refining your relational appetite. You are learning the difference between presence and proximity, between intimacy and access, between being seen and merely being used as emotional furniture in someone else's life. And yes, it is painful. Because many of the people fading from your world are not evil. Some are simply incompatible with your next level of clarity. Growth does not always end relationships through betrayal. Sometimes it ends them through silence, through reduced resonance, through the slow honesty of realizing that what once felt alive now feels rehearsed. That realization can feel like grief. Not explosive grief, quiet grief. The kind that sits beside you while you wash dishes. The kind that appears during your walk home. The kind that turns an old memory into both warmth and distance at once. You miss who you were with them. And you also know you cannot become that version of yourself again. That is sacred isolation's paradox. You are mourning identities, not just people. There was a version of you who needed constant social proof to feel real. A version who feared being alone because solitude exposed uncertainty. A version who tolerated misalignment because silence felt more threatening than compromise. That self is dissolving. This is not loss alone. It is liberation through subtraction. The soul sometimes grows by pruning, not adding. A tree in late autumn looks abandoned to the untrained eye. Leaves gone. Branches bare. Birdsong quieter. Yet this is when unnecessary weight is released. This is when the tree stops spending energy on display and redirects it towards survival, depth, and future bloom. Your life is doing the same. Isolation is your autumn. The world may interpret it as absence, but heaven interprets it as preparation. In this quieter stretch, things you once ignored become impossible to miss. Your own thought patterns, your emotional habits, the places where you abandon yourself to be easy to digest. The conversations you replay because they revealed more about your wounds than the other person's intentions. The standards you finally admit were too low for the life you're building. And that brings us to the practical transformation hidden inside this sacred season. Learn to stop chasing immediate resonance. Not every silence needs to be filled. Not every distance needs to be corrected. Not every fading connection is a problem to solve. Sometimes the most powerful standard you can build is the ability to let what is drifting, drift. Without panic. Without self-blame. Without forcing meaning. Your new life requires emotional spaciousness. The kind where you can sit with unanswered messages and still feel whole. The kind where a quiet weekend no longer reads as rejection. The kind where you stop interpreting solitude as evidence of failure. This is emotional maturity in spiritual clothing. The chosen one is not defined by how many people gather around them. They are defined by what becomes clear when no one is around. And what is becoming clear for you now is extraordinary. Your taste has changed. Your tolerance has changed. Your nervous system is learning peace over stimulation. Your spirit is craving depth over familiarity. No wonder certain rooms no longer know what to do with you. People who were comfortable with your old availability may call this distance. People who benefited from your blurred boundaries may call this change. People who relied on your emotional labor may call this coldness. Let them misunderstand. Not every explanation is worth the energy it costs. Some seasons are meant to be lived, not translated. Sacred isolation is one of them. Because what is being built here cannot be rushed by social comfort. Your discernment is sharpening. You are starting to sense the energetic cost of people, places, and patterns. You can feel when a conversation leaves residue. You notice when being around certain people requires you to dim your standards, your honesty, your calm. This awareness is not arrogance. It is stewardship. You are becoming responsible for the climate of your own inner life. That means fewer chaotic rooms, fewer obligatory interactions, fewer friendships maintained only by history, fewer yeses given from guilt. The silence is making you expensive in the best possible way. Not inaccessible, not proud. Just clear. Clear about what deserves access to your peace. And peace, once tasted deeply, changes your standards forever. There will be nights in this season where the quiet feels almost too loud, the house asleep, the city distant, the glow of a single lamp, your own breathing sounding like a conversation. These are not empty moments. These are encounters. Because once the social dust settles, you begin meeting parts of yourself that were buried beneath constant interaction. The creative self, the grieving self, the wiser self, the self that knows exactly what must end, the self that no longer negotiates with what weakens its spirit. This is why your intuition has become stronger lately. Silence sharpens subtlety. The soul does not shout. It signals. And signals are only visible when noise recedes. Perhaps that is why this season felt strangely involuntary. You did not choose every cancelled plan. You did not orchestrate every fading relationship. You did not intend for life to become this still. Yet here you are. And here, unexpectedly, you are remembering your own company. That may be the holiest part. To enjoy your own presence after years of outsourcing belonging. To sit in a room alone and not feel incomplete. To take yourself seriously enough to protect your mornings. To walk without needing someone beside you to legitimize the journey. To let your standards become stronger than your fear of being misunderstood. This is how identity stabilizes. Not in applause. In alignment. Eventually, this sacred isolation stops feeling like exile. It starts feeling like architecture. You begin to understand why certain connections had to loosen. Why your calendar needed breathing room. Why your heart required distance from familiar emotional traffic. It was not emptiness. It was construction. A cathedral is not built in a marketplace. Some structures need silence to rise. Your spirit is one of them. The people meant for your next chapter will not be threatened by your standards. They will recognize themselves in them. They will not need the smaller version of you to feel secure. They will meet your boundaries with respect. They will understand your quiet. They will not demand access where trust has not yet grown. But before those people arrive, you had to become someone who no longer bargains with loneliness. That is the true initiation of this season. To stop making fear-based connections. To stop mistaking availability for destiny. To stop lowering your standards just because the room feels empty. Empty rooms are sometimes sacred rooms. They echo because they are being prepared for voices worthy of the space. So if your life feels quieter than it used to, if your social world has thinned, if your standards have made certain people uncomfortable, if your weekends feel less crowded, but your mind feels more honest, do not mistake this for regression. This is refinement. This is sacred isolation. This is the season where your inner world becomes so ordered that chaos can no longer masquerade as companionship. And yes, there are still human moments. Moments where you miss the old noise. Where you almost text someone just to avoid yourself. Where the temptation to return to familiar dynamics feels stronger than your clarity. In those moments, remember the lantern. The cave was never empty. It was the first place the light could finally reveal the walls. Your silence is revealing the architecture of your future. Trust what has become quieter. Not everything that leaves creates loss. Some departures create room for truth. And truth needs space. So honor this season. Protect it. Let the unanswered spaces teach you. Let the stillness restore your hearing. Let the lack of constant social interaction show you who you are when no one is asking you to perform. This is where your standards become identity. This is where peace becomes preference. This is where solitude becomes sacred. And when the next people arrive, they will not be entering a void. They will be entering a life that was built in holy quiet. A life no longer desperate for company. A life no longer shaped by fear of being left out. A life anchored in standards, clarity, and soul-deep peace. This silence is not empty. It is full of the person you were finally ready to become. Affirmations. 1. I honor the sacred purpose of this season of solitude. 2. My standards protect the peace that my soul has earned. 3. In silence, I hear the truth of who I am becoming. Blessing. May this holy quiet strengthen your discernment, soften your fear of distance, and deepen your trust in divine timing. May every fading connection make room for truer alignment, every silent night restore forgotten wisdom, and every lonely moment become proof that your soul is being rebuilt in peace. May your standards remain strong, your heart remain open, and your path be filled only with what honors the life you are now ready to live.
Amen.